This week on X-Trex, Dad tries, Mom cries, everybody lies.
It's the family drama episode.
Welcome to X-Trex, a podcast where we introduce each other to our fandoms one episode at a time. I'm your host, Erin Cline, in X-Files Spooky Bitch.
And I'm your other host, Stella Cheeks, a slut for Star Trek the original series. Each podcast, we pick 2 episodes that fit a cinematic theme, watch them together, and then record our feelings.
A lot of feelings in this one, because our theme this week is family drama.
It's all feelings.
It's so much feelings.
Math. That's how we not have feelings. The episode I chose is an early season 2 classic. Yeah, they're all classics. Journey to Babel. Sure, everyone is dramatic as hell in Star Trek, but you would be hard-pressed to find a more dramatic-ass family than Spock's. With every new iteration, we learn more information about the lineage of our favorite Vulcan, and each reveal is more dramatic than the last. A secret sibling, 2 secret siblings, and it all begins here. We meet Spock's parents for the first time, which both begins the long and important history of Ambassador Sarek and Amanda, and helps to establish Spock as a child of 2 worlds. Plus, we meet the Tellarites and the Andorians, founding members of the Federation, for the first time. The fans wanted to know more about Spock, and DC Fontana said, "Oh, I got you."
And we're going way back into the early days for this one with Season 1's Beyond the Sea. Obviously, The X-Files is filled literally to the brim with family drama on Mulder's side. His missing sister, his mom with her illnesses and death, his father with his murder/murdering, his other father with his murder/murdering. But it's all very steeped in mythology and can be very difficult to just jump into the middle of. We've talked about this literally all the time. And we've already covered the Samantha is a Clone episode. So I thought it might be nice for Stella to get a view at how Scully's family is also super fucked up and might possibly contribute towards her becoming inextricably intertwined with this crazy-ass alien-obsessed weirdo boy.
Samantha is a clone. Sounds like a song.
All right. Are you ready for Dig It In There, Mr. Spock?
Always.
Teddy bear.
Not precisely, Doctor. On Vulcan, the teddy bears are alive, and they have 6-inch fangs.
First, a quick-ish episode summary. Should start, putting out a call to our listeners and be like, who wants to write the summary for this week? The Enterprise crew are all dressed up, much to McCoy's chagrin, and preparing to host an alien ambassadorial crew headed towards a contentious Federation conference. At the conference, Andorians, Vulcans, humans, Tellarites, and more will discuss the admission of the Caridian system into the Federation. It's up to Kirk and the crew to keep the peace until the conference begins. The Triumvirate welcomed the Vulcan ambassador Sarek and his human wife Amanda. Sarek is cold to Spock, even for a Vulcan, and it's revealed that Sarek and Amanda are in fact Spock's parents. Weird that he didn't tell Kirk or McCoy that. Sure, that won't happen again, ever. Amanda reveals to Kirk that Sarek and Spock have not talked to each other in 18 years, which is sort of a lie, but whatever, continuity is dumb. Because Sarek disapproved of his son's decision to join Starfleet rather than attend the Vulcan Science Academy. Later, during a reception for the passengers, the Tellarite ambassador Gav demands to know Sarek's position on Corridon. Sarek refuses, and it leads to a confrontation between the two that Kirk is forced to break up. Meanwhile, Amanda is telling embarrassing stories about her son to McCoy, who is happy as a Ceylon and shit to indulge her. Later, Uhura, doing an amazing job, A+ all around, detects an encoded transmission beamed from the Enterprise to a nearby undetectable ship, and Ambassador Gav is found murdered. Exhibiting, frankly, too much chill, Spock reveals that Gav has been murdered with an ancient Vulcan method of execution called Tal Shaya. The only person on board with motive and know-how seems to be Sarek, who, conveniently, was in private meditation at the time of the murder. The trio confront and question Sarek, who denies involvement in the murder and suffers a cardiovascular event while doing so. McCoy thinks he can operate, duh, he obviously can, but he doesn't have enough Vulcan blood or plasma because, of course, Sarek has special rare blood. Ugh, he would. Spock volunteers to donate some of his own blood for the operation using an experimental stimulant for increased blood production, and McCoy reluctantly agrees. Of course, this is the Enterprise, so nothing can go completely to plan, and Captain Kirk is stabbed by a member of the Andorian delegation and taken off duty. Spock, who is ride or die for regulations, at least when it comes to the well-being of Kirk, refuses to turn over command command and go through with the procedure. Also, let's be real, he's making the choice he thinks Sarek would approve of most. You never outgrow your desire to please your disapproving parents after all. His mom, completely fed up with his logical bullshit, slaps the shit out of her son in a spectacular emotional display. Hearing of Spock's refusal to relinquish command and recovered sufficiently enough to walk, Kirk returns to the bridge to relieve Spock and order him to sickbay, intending to turn over command to Mr. Scott. He loves to flex those acting skills. Spock is suspicious, but agrees to accompany McCoy, but then the Enterprise is attacked by a mystery ship, and Kirk stays on the bridge injured, and McCoy operates with a shaky-ass ship. Kirk lures the vessel into an ambush, but before he can question the crew, they self-destruct, as does the spy on board. Kirk gives in to his injuries and returns to sickbay, where he finds Sarek and Spock awake. You can tell that they're fine because they're both operating at 100% sass. Spock tells Kirk that he believes the Orions to be behind the attack and is confused why he didn't think of it before because he totally was not distracted for any reason at all. But before anyone can return to work, McCoy tells them all to sit down and shut the hell up. Spock and Sarek are speaking again. Amanda has her family. Kirk isn't bleeding to death, and McCoy has never been happier in his life.
Never.
What did you think of this episode?
I liked this one. I wouldn't say that if you press me to pick my favorite ones out, I don't know that I would pick this one, but I enjoyed it. You pointed out too when we started watching this, it is weird to watch this episode where I already know a lot about Spock's family.
Right, because you've seen Voyage Home,
right,
which has Sarek and Amanda, and has a confrontation between Spock and Sarek at the end where Sarek is reluctantly you did a pretty good job traveling to the past and saving the planet and stuff, I guess. And I've also seen the animated series episode with his giant teddy bear in it. Oh, that's right.
So
so you watch, especially that moment. We hear about the Selah and Aichaya for the first time in this episode, and then they expand on it in TAS. But you have seen that one first, so you've seen the cute little teddy bear save Spock's life.
It's like I watched these in reverse order almost.
You did. You watched opposite timeline.
Yeah, and in some ways, I guess that's good because I was prepared. Also, part of the conceit of this show, obviously, is that we have the theme, and so I knew going in that it was going to be about family drama. But as soon as Sarek walked in, I was like, oh, that's his dad. It never even occurred to me that people didn't know it was his dad. Right. And so then the reveal of Ambassador Sarek and his wife Amanda are my parents was well, yeah, duh.
Right. Also, she's very clearly human, and your mom is a human. It's not there are tons of interspecies marriages at this point.
Right, exactly. Also, just
basically, Kirk and McCoy are dumbasses for not figuring it out.
I mean, for real.
Hey, don't you want to visit your parents? They're right. They're right.
The one who just said that he didn't want me to give them the tour of the ship. Yeah, it's my dad. Cool. Super cool.
Super neat.
I like the costuming detail that Amanda covers the tops of her ears with her hair. I just think that's a really nice.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. And every time she has her hair styled, she covers the top of her ears. And it's oh, that makes sense as a human living on a Vulcan planet that you would kind of obscure the top of your ears to not immediate. Obviously they know, but it's just a good detail costume wise. Also, A+ costumes, top to bottom. Everyone on this show.
Amanda's outfits are so good.
So good. All of the ambassadors too from the other races all had really good costumes, other than the little people whose necks weren't painted for some reason.
Well, originally they get a name in a James Blish book, I think. But originally they wanted to, because I'm jumping ahead, but so by this time in the series, we already know the Vulcans and humans, right? And we know the Federation, Starfleet. But founding member races of the Federation are the Andorians, who are the blue ones, the Tellarites, who are kind of the pig-looking ones, Vulcans, and humans. And they were going to have the other aliens, the gold ones, which I'll look it up in a second. They do have a name, but they were it just is so much time and money to fully paint someone. And we already have these prosthetics made, and
yeah.
I don't know. I guess we're just not going to do that.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I assume too part of it is we've talked about this before, where we're watching this in HD, and when it's in a grainy television, it probably was a lot harder to tell this part of them is just not painted. But it was really obvious that part of them weren't painted, which was a weird contrast to how well costumed everybody else in the show was too. But in general, I really liked all of the costume design for this.
Well, a cool part about this too. So this was written by DC Fontana, who is a big deal founding, she's a staff writer essentially. I know they don't technically have a staff, but or staff writer or writer's room in the way that we think of it now, but she was she's written a bunch of the episodes and it's very important in the history of Star Trek. But she wrote this essentially as a ship in the bottle episode because they don't go anywhere. It takes place completely on the Enterprise, and any of the arrivals, like outside shots or like reused shots, so that they could spend a ton of money on like costumes and makeup. Because she was like, well, we're gonna have to have all these aliens on board, like that's the point of this episode. So she wrote it specifically so that they wouldn't go anywhere, so that they could spend their budget on costumes and props and costumes and makeup, and it is super effective and totally works.
Yes.
And like I said, like we meet, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we meet the Andorians. It definitely is the first time we meet the Tellarites, and those become like foundational alien races in all of Star Trek. So like it's one of those things like, this is just kind of some aliens we made up, and oh my god, they're very important, especially like when you get to Star Trek Enterprise. Like there's a ton of Andorian stuff that happens in Enterprise and beyond, and it's just cool to be like, yeah, I don't know, paint it blue, put antennas on it, and it's like, oh nope, you have to do that forever now.
And like it makes sense too in the way that production was run back then. You spend this money and you have these prosthetics, or like we were talking about, and then you have these prosthetics, and like you can continue using them going forward, and you don't have to like blow as much of your budget going forward. So it's a great idea to like, let's focus, and in this episode we're gonna blow the whole budget on prosthetics, on paint, on costumes, and then going forward we like have this base too where we're not spending so much money on it. So I think it's a really smart move.
Well, and it's cool too because like obviously this is the first time those alien species have been introduced, so like some of the things that are said or acting choices that are made like really affect the rest of the universe, right? Like when the Andorian says like, oh, we're a violent race, like they're a violent race, but in a very different way than like Vulcans were a violent race. Right. And then somebody had to like figure out like, how are they different? Or like, this is an anecdote I found while researching, and I just thought it was really cool. It says, actor John Wheeler, in character as Gov, the Tellarite, had so much trouble seeing through the prosthetics over his eyes that he was forced to raise his head to see his castmates. And this added to the early mythos that all Tellarites were arrogant as well as belligerent and aggressive. And that's like part of their culture now. So it's like to say hello, you like insult each other, right? Like, so that's just like a part of the culture.
Interesting.
Like, this is how, that's why when Sarek is like, oh, Tellarites just like to argue, that also helped to like build that mythos of like, this is how they communicate, this is how they stand.
Yeah.
But it was just like a prosthetic choice, but it affects.
You can tell too.
Right. I mean, it's a weird prosthetic. Like, it helps with the beady eye type thing because they're like set back. But I think that's so interesting, just like these little choices that like a guest actor made affects the whole series, which is part of the best part of watching like a TOS and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
but it is cool.
It is literally the foundations for a like multi-generational series, which is really cool. And like weird shit like that. It's sort of like we talked about when, I don't remember which episode this was, but where we saw Spock in like the black slick Under Armour shirt. And it's like, you only see this for a second, but it has like these huge ripple effects going out where it's because people really grab onto it. It seems like there's so much of that in TOS where like you can kind of like throw a dart and hit anything, and it's like, okay, this now then ripples off.
Well, there's so much in this episode specifically. Like even that scene with Spock and Amanda where Spock is like telling her why he's not going to relinquish command. And she tells the story of like, when you were 5 years old and you came home and you're sad after getting beat up, like blah, blah, blah. She tells that anecdote, and that anecdote is turned into a giant scene, both in Yesteryear, the TAS episode, but also in AOS, the first Star Trek movie. Yep. Like that's a big opening scene of like Spock getting his ass kicked.
Yes.
And like, that's just like a throwaway line here. But also, even though this episode plants the seeds that get built up a lot, this episode also interestingly builds on the seeds that were planted in season 1, like the whole like Spock is of two worlds, or like he has a human mother and a Vulcan father, or even early season 2 where it's like we know that his family is this like high up like fancy ass family because we meet his grandma in Amok Time who is like, I'm a big fucking deal, and then it's like, oh, not only am I a big fucking deal, my son, Sarek, is also a big fucking deal. Oh, wait, Spock's a big fucking deal.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there was a lot about this episode that I liked a lot. And also, like, we cannot go any further without talking about how fucking great a Bones episode this is.
A fucking great
it's
Bones
such
episode.
A good Bones. It starts off right away as a great Bones episode. Like, this fucking, God, dress uniform. And like trying to learn to do the Vulcan salute where he's like, oh, it's even more painful than the uniform. Like, Jesus Christ.
I like that he has a moment of like trying to be like relatable and like, okay, we have ambassadors coming and stuff, and he's like, oh no, fuck this, I can't do this.
He's like, I put in as much effort as I'm humanly willing.
10 seconds of effort, I'm over it.
I tried to make my husband happy, and you know what? Fuck it. Like, Jesus Christ.
Fuck
Bones.
all of this. And then when that scene where he like pries the story of the Selah out of Amanda, and he's like, a teddy
His
bear?
eyes turn to like dinner plates. He's like, what?
All of his teeth. I also
so
love that
excited.
Kirk walks up, has no idea what they're talking about, but can totally tell that Bones is giving Spock shit because Spock is just standing there like really petulant. And Kirk's like, what's happening here? I like this dynamic, clearly.
I'm into this. Spock's like, they also had 6-inch fangs that were quite dangerous, actually. And Bones is like, it was a fat teddy bear. I love it. It's so cute.
Also, if we're going to keep talking about like good spotlight episodes, great episode for Chapel.
Yes, Chapel fucks. I love Chapel. I feel like if I was watching this normally from like beginning to end, as most people probably do, I don't know if I would have the same affinity for Chapel, but like I think it's just like the buildup of having watched these Chapel episodes like slowly and like in this like hodgepodge order where I'm just like, man, I fucking love Chapel. Every time I see her, I'm like, she's so competent, she's so good at her job, she fits into this crew so fucking well. And like now knowing also about the actor having like, I'm gonna put this blonde wig on, no one's gonna know that it's me. Like I just have this like huge affinity for her, so I loved this episode for her.
Yeah, they keep being like, Chapel, do this, and she's like, I already did.
Don't worry, I'm extremely competent.
And also, like, Bones and Chapel are operating at this very sensitive thing. Bones is like, I've never done surgery on a Vulcan before. And this is clearly before Mbenga, like, joins the crew. Because later on, they get a doctor who specializes in Vulcan medicine. So Bones is like, I don't know. And
figure it out, I guess.
And they have to do this very delicate surgery that they've never done before while the ship is being shaken apart. And, like, she's there helping him, too. Her
She's
hands
doing
are
a great
fucking in that
job.
machine. Like, Chapel does not get enough credit.
No, Chapel rules.
Chapel rules.
Also, you can see like her entire butt in this episode, which was very shocking, but also was like, damn, Chapel. Get it, girl.
Get it, girl.
This rules.
All of this, it rules.
All this, it's working for me. I like it.
Also, honestly, like, we don't see Scotty or Sulu, but, like, Chekhov and Uhura also have really good,
Yeah.
like, we're super competent. Like, there's this, it's such a little moment. I don't even know if you notice it, but there's this moment where Kirk comes onto the bridge to, like, relieve Spock, and he's, like, clearly acting. And Uhura, like, can tell that something's up right away, and she, like, goes to help him, and he, like, does, like, a hand signal, like, no, 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 no. And it's just, like, obviously my favorite, like, one of my favorite headcanons is that they're super besties. And I'm like, she's like, oh, I can tell my best friend is hurt. And he's like, we're communicating silently. We're going to dupe this. And she's like, okay, I got it. And it's, like, this teeny tiny little thing. And I'm like, they're best friends. Because at the end, as soon as Spock leaves, she's like, are you okay?
I'm fine. I love, too, that he has no compunctions about lying to either of his husbands in that scene. He's like, cool, Bones, you know what we're going to do? Trick Spock. And Bones is like, my favorite thing in the world, to trick Spock. Let's fucking do it. But then you'll go back to bed, right? And he's like, yeah.
I
Wink.
think he meant to, but then he got distracted immediately and was like, never mind.
Yeah, but Bones should have fucking
Yeah, he
known
should have
that. Like, if he had thought for 4 fucking seconds, he would have been like, this bitch isn't gonna go back to bed. There's no goddamn way. And he does it. The ship shakes for like a half second. And he's like, actually, I'll just stay here. This is fine. I'll be fine here.
I'll be fine. I have my sparkly bandage. I'm good.
I got my very sparkly bandage underneath of my wrap shirt for some reason.
I love that outfit. That's not the first time you've seen it, because that was the Tribbles outfit, too.
Oh, I guess I just never noticed that it has
The little Starfleet insignia belt.
Right, exactly. And I noticed it this time because it's normally like the patch up on the breastplate. And I was like, what is with this? But I like it.
There are a couple of really funny, kind of like crack fic. They're crack fics, but also like regular fics. I've read some where Kirk is a girl and she wears that outfit, and everyone's like, you can't wear that. And she's like, it's a uniform, so if you don't want me to wear it, you have to change the uniform. And she's just like big slut energy with their slutty captain's uniform.
I love it. I like the idea that that's why Kirk is also wearing. He's like, you can just kind of peek in, see my chest a little bit.
Oh, yeah, big slut energy. That's like Captain Kirk, all universes.
He does have big slut energy.
Yeah.
It's true. I loved too how delighted he was about like, I'm impressing my father-in-law. I'm very good at this. Look at me. My father-in-law is so
Look at me
impressed.
relate to like my mother-in-law too. Like,
right?
they have like a nice heart to heart. And one of the criticisms of this episode was like, why would Amanda like just tell all of this like personal shit to Captain Kirk? And I was like, well, why wouldn't you, though?
Right, exactly.
I mean, I guess if you're looking through this to this episode through a very boring lens, then yeah, that doesn't make sense. But if you're looking at it through the correct lens, then it makes a lot of sense.
Well, also, like, even if you're looking at it through, like, a super boring cishet whatever lens, like, she more or less says, like, Sarek is like, he is a captain, like, I'm the ambassador. I'm not supposed to have like a XY relationship with him. And she's like, yeah, I'm his mom and I'm a human. And like the implied thing there is that's my job as a human mom is to embarrass the fuck out of my kid. And like, cool. You know what? That probably is how that would happen. And especially if it's like, I know my son well enough to know that he loves his job and he's very close with this crew and like Starfleet is his home. Like, even if Jim isn't his boyfriend, he's close with him. And like, I, as his parent, want to like brag about and make fun of my son in this way that like his boss also will enjoy. And so
you know that,
I feel
like,
that fits.
Sarek and even if Sarek and Spock don't talk, like Spock still is the mama's boy and calls his mom.
Yeah, all the time.
Spock calls his mommy.
Yeah, she says it's been like 4 years since she's seen him, which means like he does visit her. And I assume that Spock and Jim have been friends for longer than that. So like at this point at least. So
yeah, I have no idea the timeline right now.
He must know that he and Amanda are like close, even if he doesn't like recognize immediately when she comes on the ship that that's who that is. Although again, how is it not obvious?
I feel like it is because she's like, I'm glad he has friends like you.
Yeah.
Wink.
Wink. Wink. Yeah, I liked this episode. I also I cannot go past Kirk saying, will that fill your prescriptions? Which just feels like something they absolutely have said together in bed.
Oh, they definitely do Dr. Roleplay all the time.
100%. Just lay there and be happy and let that be a lesson to you. Oh, will that fill your prescription, Bones?
I mean, at the end where Bones is like telling everybody to shut up and like the look on Kirk's face of like exasperated, but also like kind of like liking how indulgent he is being to Bones is very cute.
No.
Because Spock is just like eyebrows, and Kirk is like, I do love you.
Yeah. And I also like that bonding between Sarek and Spock at the end where they're just like making fun of Amanda. Like that is
in the most logical way.
It is just the most relatable family shit of all time.
Well, I also think a really relatable thing about this is like part of the reason Sarek and Spock don't get along is because in very like true like why families don't get along form, it's because they're so similar. Like even Kirk is like, yes, they're both stubborn assholes. Got it.
Got it.
But like the way that they like think about logic or tease Amanda or like their supreme fucking bitchiness, like Sarek from the get is just a huge bitch. Like that line where Gav comes up to him on the second time and is like, tell me, or I would like to speak to you or whatever. And Sarek's like, it seems it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Supreme bitch.
He also has that great line, threats are illogical and payments are usually expensive.
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay. I like that a lot. I was like, okay, that fucking rules.
Yeah, he has some really good one-liners. I also love that, like, we get the parallel of, like, Vulcans do this, but also, like, this annoying parallel of, like, Spock and Sarek just calculating odds for, like, no reason. And that moment where Amanda's like, please don't.
Can we shut the fuck up, please?
I don't need to know the precise odds of one of you, maybe both of you dying in this moment. Please stop.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that they respect it, too, where, like, I think that there are other moments where both of them would be like, no, I insist on telling you what the odds are. And with her, they're like, okay, yeah, that's all right, fine.
Yeah.
Sure, Amanda, whatever.
What did you think of the espionage?
I mean, I predicted right away it was going to be one of the blue guys, knowing
Why?
literally nothing about them. Honestly, it was because it was the only person who had a speaking line other than the pig ambassador, the Tellarites, and Sarek. And so I was like, well, they wouldn't just introduce this blue guy for no fucking reason whatsoever.
It was a different blue guy.
Yeah, but it's part of the same race. Like, it's not like...
But it wasn't. It was an Orion. Whoa.
Yes, I know that, but that was my instinct, was like, okay, well, they introduced him for, like, some reason. He's got to be connected somehow. So that was why I assumed it was him. And then I like how they flashed to that fight scene where it's like, everything's normal, things are going fine.
Smash cut! Yeah, I even wrote, smash cut fight!
Which was a pretty good fight, too.
Really weird kick off the wall fall.
Yeah, I need assistance. Captain! Captain!
Oh, I love throughout this whole episode how Kirk just like punches like buttons.
I love it. That was one of the last things I wrote down was that I really enjoyed the very aggressive button whacking the whole time. He's just like, whap! I do not have time for this.
I am stabbed. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, again, this episode has so much in it.
Yeah, there's
so
a
much
lot going on.
important stuff, building on stuff, setting up stuff, and there's like a lot going on. And I like this episode a lot, but it's not one that I'm like, well, I'm gonna sit down and watch Journey to Babel.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird how like the pieces of it are stronger than the whole in lots of ways because it's done very well and like everything really comes. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of loose threads. It doesn't feel like there's a lot that they set up and then they just kind of abandoned, which sometimes does happen. Like it's easy to do that sometimes. Where you're like, this is just a subplot and we don't have to like push this into the greater whole. Also, I love that Sarek in a very human way was like, yeah, I've had 3 previous heart attacks and I just, didn't fucking say anything about it. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, oh, Amanda's like, what in the... Because when he walks in...
He's like, I'm just going to meditate / maybe die in this closet.
Right? And like, I liked too, because I noticed when he walked in, right before he had that second confrontation with Gav, that he takes a pill, and I was like, why would he do this here in the middle of this crowded party and not in his room where Amanda is? And then they explain, like, because she doesn't know that this stuff is happening either. Right. And so he's like trying to be like hidden in public while he's doing this. And so I like too that this is like this additional detail that like really circled back and they tied together very well.
Well, and they set it up too, like that scene where Bones is like, 102 is so young to like retire for a Vulcan. And he's like, no, this is fine.
It's none of your motherfucking business,
None of your
Bones.
fucking business. But I mean, this like random experimental surgery that Bones does works because that motherfucker lives for a long time.
Yes. How long do Vulcans normally live?
Like 200-ish years, I think.
Okay.
I would have to look it up precisely, but it's around like double.
Okay. Yeah, because like then that 102 would put him at like 50.
Yeah.
That would be pretty young to retire.
Especially from like such a prominent like position.
Right. Yeah, as like an ambassador, it would take like a giant health scare basically in order to retire that young. What great writing.
Yeah, DC Fontana is the best. Like Bobby said when we were prepping, like we need to do a Patreon episode or some kind of bonus episode where we just talk about DC Fontana and how fucking cool and important she was.
Yeah.
Because she rules.
Dope.
Speaking of, there's a couple of quotes from her that I really liked because she wrote this specifically to expand on Spock's background. She got the idea for this, or like the idea of like introducing Sarek and Amanda from the episode This Side of Paradise, which we haven't watched yet. But Spock says the line specifically, my mother was a school teacher and my father was an ambassador. So she took that line that was written in the first season and was like, how do I expand upon that? And there's like a lot of lore about Amanda in different books and iterations. Like some people, I think like, I honestly at this point cannot tell you what is fanon and what is canon. I didn't dig enough, but generally I think it's known that she is like a linguist and somebody who teaches language because that's part of the reason why she met Sarek. And then in some iterations, I can't remember if this canon or fanon, she helped to develop the universal translator.
Oh, interesting.
So when there's that moment where Kirk's like, can you pronounce your own name? And she's like, yes, I can.
It took me a long time. And I like, too, that it's not just like, yes, you piece of shit. Of course I can pronounce my own fucking name. But like, yeah, it took me a long time. And it's something that I had to study. And
it's my literal whole thing.
Right, exactly. And like, having seen more of Amanda in other interpretations, too, like, that's a part of her character that she spends a lot of time integrating into Vulcan society. And so I like this piece of that too, that like this seems like one of those like roots for that as well, where it's like, yeah, I took the time to do this. I took the time to be very thoughtful and like characteristic of myself that this is how I handled this. And yes, I can do this. And like, I understand why you think I might not be able to because I'm a human living in a Vulcan society, but I have integrated. And like, I really liked that a lot.
And if you go with the idea that she's like a linguist or a language teacher, like it would make sense why somebody would with that type of inclination would be interested and okay with like completely integrating themselves into another society.
Right.
Also, if you're an ambassador's wife, you go all over. So like you could listen and learn so much new cool shit.
And you don't, like, you can still be a human when you're traveling with your ambassador husband, because you don't always have to be completely integrated into Vulcan society, too.
Yeah, it's cool. She also wrote, I sat down and created 2 characters emphasizing the triangular relationship and rift between Sarek and Spock with Amanda positioned in the middle. It was really about the generation gap, which can either be a wall or, you know, something warm and lovely. And in this case, it's a wall as far as between the father and son, which I think is like a really interesting, like, what would it be like to be a full-blooded Vulcan and have a son who is half human, half Vulcan? Obviously, like, love logically, but like love Amanda, but like how do you reconcile all of that? And it's like, oh, I'll just completely retreat into being a Vulcan, like a very stern dick Vulcan, which like seems very like old school. This is what like dads and stuff do. They're like, I'll just go really, really hard the other way because I don't know how to go this way.
Yes, totally.
Which makes a lot of sense. The original actors who play Amanda and Sarek obviously show up again in the movies. Sarek shows up in Search for Spock, Mark Leonard, who also was in the Romulan in Balance of Terror. And then the actress Jane Wyatt, who plays Amanda, shows up in Voyage Home. And then, of course, these characters are shown in the animated series, the J.J. Abrams movies, and then there's a new Sarek and Amanda in Discovery, it's the same timeline, so they're the same characters, but they're different actors, obviously. And I think the actors that they got for Discovery are really good. And boy, do you learn a lot about Sarek that is not great. So if you want some family drama, season 2 of Discovery is like just all Spock's family drama. So buckle up for that. I learned this, and this made me I was just like, I'm so happy we do this show because I never would have known this, and this is a fact that I was so delighted to learn. So obviously, like we've talked about before, that like Vulcans kiss with their hands, and then in like fic and stuff, it's like we've turned this into a whole ass erogenous zone, and like it's like a very, you know, Vulcans are a very hand-based society. Obviously, they have the greeting with their hands, and they're touch telepaths, and so Leonard Nimoy said he recalled that Mark Leonard and Jane Wyatt came to him for advice on Vulcan culture. We want to make sure the choices that we're making are in line with the choices that you've made and set up and that you know. So they had like a Vulcan powwow, I guess. And Nimoy said that he had come to believe that Vulcans placed great importance on their hands and hand gestures and suggested that Leonard and Wyatt find a way to demonstrate that when on screen. And they're the ones that came up with the kiss.
Oh,
isn't that awesome? First of all, they're just macking on each other the whole damn time.
They do a lot of that.
She who is my wife. But I just like that is again just a little gesture that was created on one episode of the show, and then the fandom and the lore and the writers were like, yeah, they kiss with their hands a lot. And it's just 2 actors that kind of didn't know anything about Star Trek that just were like, we're just gonna make a choice, and that is awesome.
Yeah. It's a great choice.
It's a great choice because it's very visual, but it's also very personal. Like you would never just go up to a stranger and be like, touch your 2 fingers to my 2 fingers. Like it's a weird thing to do, but if you're like, this is a cultural thing.
And it's like ornamental in the way that you see like Victorian and like Renaissance depictions of people like courting and like holding hands too. I feel like it fits in with that like Victorian Vulcan idea too.
Totally. And the like presentation and like high society vibe of like Vulcans, like everything we do is ostentatious as shit. Like it's great. Yeah, that's all of the like mythology and apocrypha and stuff I have. I feel like I'm a broken record sometimes with this like idea, but I just think that it's so interesting, all of the seeds and important shit that was planted in this episode. And I really like that DC Fontana and Jane Wyatt and Mark Leonard were really respectful of what they had already done, because this is early-ish season 2. It's like season 2, episode 10. But obviously so much stuff happened in like the 30 episodes or 29 episodes of season 1. And I just really like that everybody was kind of like, we're building a thing here. Like we're going to reference stuff. Like this isn't a particularly referential show at this point, but it helps to build that like continuity and that world building. And like, this is obviously a show, especially TOS is very much a show about character and character relationships and like not as much about world building. And so to world build through the characters is like very smart and cool. And I love it. You ready for Synopsis Showdown?
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Made it seem like we have good ones.
We don't.
We struggled with this one.
We both struggled.
So much happens in this episode. It was hard. I wrote like 4 different ones and crossed them out. Who knew the best way to reconcile with an estranged parent was to donate your blood while your boyfriends show off by solving crimes, preventing war, and accomplishing medical miracles?
That's a pretty good one, actually. An interplanetary commission quickly turns into a theater for murder. Father and son blood bonding. In the end, Bones really makes out the best with all the zingers.
That was great. You didn't think that was good?
No.
That was good. I literally say the entire plot, and then we have like a half an hour discussion about the plot. I don't think we really have to bring it home with the synopsis.
That's fair.
Are you ready for Mulder? It's me. I was like, which one do we do?
Yes.
Last time you were that engrossed, it turned out you were reading the adult video news.
I didn't think you'd be in today.
All right. This is a semi-quick episode summary. It's like a page and a half, so maybe not so quick. After having her family over for dinner, Scully wakes on her couch to see a vision of her father sitting next to her, creepily speaking in silence. The phone rings, and it's her mom telling her that her father had a heart attack and died an hour earlier. Spooky! Meanwhile, a couple is kidnapped by a man dressed as a police officer, poorly, by the way, and a serial killer named Boggs, who Mulder helped catch back before the alien days, has claimed that he has psychic visions and can help them find the couple if they can get his death sentence commuted before his impending execution. When they visit Boggs in prison, Mulder is uncharacteristically skeptical of his visions and gives him a piece of evidence to prove that he can really help them. Except, psych, it's actually just a piece of Mulder's shirt that he tore off, you dumb piece of shit. However, as they are leaving, Scully looks back and sees another vision of her father, and Boggs begins singing Beyond the Sea, the song they played for him at his funeral, which could have been in Arlington with full regalia. This is what your father wanted. Scully, characteristically, in a way that will be repeated over and over in this series, says nothing to Mulder about this, and they discuss whether Boggs may have set this all up with an accomplice in order to avoid the chair. They try to trick Boggs with a fake newspaper saying the couple has been found, but he sees through this like literally immediately, but gives them information about where to find the couple anyway, which Scully uses and does successfully find the location Boggs told them about. She calls him back up, and they are able to rescue the woman, but Mulder is shot, because that's what Mulder does, and the kidnapper escapes with the man. Scully visits Boggs again and is told where she'll find the kidnapper and the man, but she's got to be careful of the devil. Something Scully's Catholic ass is like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever, can do.
I'm always careful of the devil.
Always careful about the devil. Scully does find the kidnapper and the man in a brewery and is able to rescue the man and is chasing the kidnapper when she pulls to a halt over the gentry, seeing the brewery's logo, a leering blue devil. The kidnapper runs and, surprise, plunges to his death. He fell. Scully returns one more time to visit Boggs and says that if he had orchestrated the kidnapping, then why didn't he tell the kidnapper about the danger that he warned Scully about? He tells her that he can give her the message from her dead father if she'll agree to attend his execution as his witness. She's like, what? How dare you? And in a very Mulder-like defiance, blows him the fuck off. Boggs is led to his execution where he sees the ghosts of all the people he murdered, his family, creepily after eating Thanksgiving dinner as his like penance meal, I guess.
Also like the largest family.
Yeah. I mean, that's like my Thanksgiving family. There's like 50 fucking people there. Maybe he's Catholic. Who the fuck knows? And he sees that Scully did not attend the execution to hear her father's last message, and he is killed. Scully goes to visit Mulder, and for some reason has decided it definitely was all a hoax, and Boggs must have found out that she was his partner and just Googled all of this information, I guess, about her father in order to get under her skin. Mulder is like, literally, what the fuck? We just spent this whole episode with our MOs reversed, and now you don't believe him? Wouldn't have been worth it to go to the execution just to see what he has to say? And Scully's like, no, fuck that. I already know what he would say. He was my dad. Fuck that family killer. The end. What did you think of this episode?
I thought this episode was fantastic. I don't say the word favorite in that, like, I want to be like, I'm just going to watch Beyond the Sea. It's so fun. But, like...
I love the idea of people being like, hey, Stella, what's your favorite episode of The X-Files? You're like, Beyond the Sea.
But this episode is incredibly well acted from both the guy that plays Boggs and Scully. Like, this is...
Yes.
I was just like, especially for season 1 and for like a silly show about supernatural, whatever, I was like, this is like Emmy acting. This episode is very good. Mm-hmm. I mean, the guy that plays Boggs is like an incredible character actor, and it's like literally his IMDb page is like upsettingly long. Like, he's very
Brad Dourif
good.
is his name, yeah.
But like, holy shit, he's so good in this episode.
Yes.
Like, and a lot of like supernatural stuff is especially the X-Files is like, is it real or is it fake? We don't know. But I feel like sometimes you can kind of be like, well, it was real or it was fake. But this one I feel like is a really good episode of like, I don't know. Because there is part of me as a viewer that I'm like, he absolutely is a psychic, right? But then there is plenty of like evidence that's like, well, she was seeing shit because she just lost her dad and she's going through trauma. And he's like, you know, perpetrating like this crime because he's so scared of the death sentence and being in that chair again. It is just like really, that like fine line is really well written in a way that it isn't a lot. And it is acted incredibly.
Yes, absolutely.
It is a fantastic episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, this is early. It's episode 13 of season 1. And so this is the first time they really dive into Scully's backstory. Like, that's why this episode was written, is because there had been a lot of like fan clamoring for like, we really want to know more about Scully. And so this is how they introduce like, also her family's super fucked up. And like, this is one of the only like, you get to see her family at her dad's funeral. And so you see her brother Bill, who you'll see more of later, who fucking hates Mulder. Hates him.
I mean, if your sibling's best
reason.
friend was Mulder, wouldn't you be like, no?
Absolutely.
You not only are you her friend and I don't think you guys should be friends, but also like you have a very dangerous job and I don't trust you with the life of my sister.
Yes.
Feels like the right call.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And then we also see, I actually don't think Melissa was in that scene. Melissa was not in that scene. Melissa's her younger sister who you'll meet later and becomes very important. But she wasn't in that scene. But her brother Charlie, who we never see again, but is mentioned many times by their mother as like defecting from the family, basically, is present in this scene too. So you get these like beginning ideas of what Scully's family looks like, which I like a lot.
I know Scully's religious, but is she specifically Catholic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That would make sense.
Very Catholic.
Several siblings.
Yes, several siblings. Her family's like hella Catholic. Her sister Melissa's like a hippy dippy, but is also still religious. Yeah. Like very Catholic. The whole deal, you know.
Well, I don't know. You know.
No, I know. Yeah, you know from knowing me.
Yeah. I know in theory.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that I really like about this episode, this is also, Chris Carter says this is his favorite episode from his first season, and so does Gillian Anderson. They both really enjoyed this episode.
I mean, honestly, like, having seen almost all of season 1 and having technically seen it all, but I can't remember, like, the ones we haven't watched, I think it's got to be one of the best, if not, like, the best. I think it is an incredible episode. I really do.
Yeah, and like Brad Dourif, one of the things that he's most famous for at this point when this episode aired was that he was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and won, I think he was nominated for an Oscar. Yeah, he was nominated for an Oscar for that. Is super well cast, and Chris Carter fought really hard with the studio in order to hire him because he was obviously very expensive.
Right.
And they weren't really doing stunt casting. I wouldn't really even describe this as stunt casting. No. I think he's just perfect for this part. And Chris Carter fought really hard for it. And so he went to the president of 20th Century Fox, his name was Peter Roth, during his Thanksgiving dinner and like convinced him to hire this guy, which worked. Like, this episode would not be as good if Brad Dourif was not playing this like really incredible character.
Well, he's like so good at the like, because he's a very good actor of like doing the switching from like I'm like a little girl and now I'm like, you know, a kidnappee and now I'm your dad. Like, he's very good at acting that. But there's also just like when he's just Boggs, there is like a genuineness there, which is the part that makes it confusing. Like
that scene where he's like, do not underestimate my fear of dying and do not underestimate how scared I am to go back to this chair.
Especially because she comes in and yells in his face and then he like, they have this conversation and he's like, no, wait a minute, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, it is that scene between just them is incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And originally Dorff was asked to appear in this episode with only 4 days of preparation. And he was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't think I can do this in 4 days. And so they gave him an extra week to prepare for it. And he was like, all right, a week and a half, I can do this for sure.
That's crazy.
And like, to know he turned out this performance in a fucking week and a half is wild. And like, I've only ever really acted in theater. And so the idea of like, here's a part, do this in a day and a half on television is just absolutely fucking mind blowing to me. It feels like a superpower. And so I found that he both accepted it with an additional week and then just absolutely nailed it. Just like absolutely incredible. Also, just as like a fun aside, while he was getting into character between takes, he would do these like deep breathing exercises that turned his face bright purple, and the cast and crew were like, what the fuck is happening? But like, it works. It clearly is something that was necessary.
Yeah, and well, you see him do like deep breathing as part of the like switching from like the possessions or whatever, and it's super effective. I even thought that, like, having like a theater background, blah blah blah, I thought several times like the breath work he's doing and the like choices he's making with his breath specifically is so interesting and very effective.
Yeah, I totally agree. This character, Luther Lee Boggs, it was supposed to, everyone says that it greatly resembles Richard Ramirez, which if you know anything about Richard Ramirez, is not true. Like, he was not the original Night Stalker, because that's Golden State Killer, but the Night Stalker, who was the like California vampire. He's the one that, for anyone listening who knows this, he was caught because he was in a Latino neighborhood and they recognized him, and like 100 people chased his ass down and sat on top of him until the cops came and they made like a community arrest. So like his story is actually very interesting.
Incredible.
But he's Latino, and so like it does not look anything like this character, but that was like cited over and over, is that they like styled him to sort of be that like very creepy, like long scraggly hair, kind of like bereft appearance almost. So I found that I was like, I never would have put those two things together. I thought that was very strange. But the name Luther Lee Boggs, and then Lucas Henry, who was the accomplice who never got caught, was killed, really unclear.
He fell and died.
Yeah. Those names are inspired by the real life serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, who is fucked up, killed a bunch of people and like specifically tortured children, and also like worked with an accomplice who was like mentally deficient in many ways. And so later, as he was interviewed and they found out more and more about his killings, it was like, oh, you're like a master manipulator. And so I thought that was also an interesting way to like plant that seed for people in the 90s who like knew about Henry Lee Lucas, like, oh, okay, I get this. This guy might be a liar.
Well, it's really interesting too, because like, I think that it shows too, because like we see Lucas Henry, like, and we see that he is like a little, he's crazy, right? He's like recreating this like torture and murder that happened, and when he goes to kill the male kid, he is clearly like going through it and like shaking and has like a physical like reaction to like what's going on in his head. And so like I think that's a really interesting choice to be like, this seems like someone who could probably be manipulated by somebody who is capable of manipulating,
right?
Like Scully and Mulder, like, you know, if he's good enough to manipulate like FBI agents, like he can definitely manipulate somebody who's like struggling with like mental impairment.
Right.
And so I think that added another really good layer of like, is he, isn't he? But also like if he was manipulating him, making sure that he like maybe died was also a good way to like cover your tracks. I don't know. Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really good, like, I have no idea if this dude was a psychic or not.
Yeah. I like, the more times I've watched this episode, I fall on, I think he actually was a psychic, especially because they show the ghosts as he's going to the chair. It's like, okay, you're like experiencing these visions, but also like that scene where she lies to him and is like, okay, you've got your deal. And then he like gives her the information and she's like, well, if you were really a psychic, he's like, I would have known that you lied because you did. But I appreciate that you tried. And that's what was really important to me. And like that scene more than anything convinced me like, okay, I think he actually is a psychic. And like the piece of the New York Knicks t-shirt where Mulder's like, you dumb piece of shit, I just did this thing, which we were talking later too, while we were watching it, about how they do the same thing in Clyde Bruckman, and Clyde Bruckman's like, this is just trash. Like, why did you give me this trash t-shirt? Like, I like that they bring that back later. But I also feel like Boggs doesn't need anything. He doesn't need to have a piece of evidence because he's had all these like dead people's souls inside of him because of the gas chamber. Like, it's just part of his theater for Mulder and Scully, but like as an actual psychic, he doesn't require any of that. Right. Which I enjoy those like details, but I like that because of the way the story is being told, it does present this like, is he not? Like, what's the fucking deal here?
Right. I'm more inclined to believe that he's a psychic too, because like Scully can explain it away and be like, well, I mean, that song was playing at my parents' like wedding, and like he could have done all this research and stuff, but it's also like, this is like, he's in prison, he's on death row,
It's the early 90s.
It's the early 90s. It's not like he's just like hanging out on a computer. And even if he was, it's not like there's a ton of access. It's not like he could go on Scully's mom's Facebook and find a video of their like, so it's like that is like a pretty specific thing to know. Even if you knew a ton about Mulder and Scully, like where would you find that?
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of the reason why I'm like, it seems like more. Or like honestly, how would you even find out that he calls his daughter Starbuck?
Right, exactly. That they have these very specific nicknames for each other. And again, it's not like he could go on Facebook and see that. Like, where would you even find this information? It doesn't seem like it would be publicly available. I think that's ultimately, too, why Mulder in the end is like, what the fuck? Why can't you just believe, for God's sake?
It brings him around on it.
Right, exactly. It's like, I didn't believe any of this, but now that he's dead and we found these kids and you're telling me these additional details, like, I can't believe you don't believe this. Like, I really like that. Also, just as like a side too, those nicknames Ahab and Starbuck are from Moby Dick. Obviously, you know that, but for anyone who doesn't know that, and those are references that continue for like the rest of the series too. Like Scully constantly references back to Moby Dick. She names her dog Queequeg. Like there are things that come up very often, and it's because she has this very intense connection to her dad who died suddenly and who she really wanted to be proud of her, and never gets the satisfaction of like she says at the end, he was my dad. I know he was proud of me. And I think that scene, too, at the end of dinner where he is like, so how's work going? Okay, great, goodbye. It's like that. Sometimes that's just, your family well enough to know, like, that was it.
Right.
This was the most you could do. And I have to accept and I have to take that.
Well, it's like what I was talking about before with, like, the Sarek thing. Like, I so fundamentally don't know how to relate to you, so I'm just going to retreat back into myself. Feels like a very similar, like, I don't know how to relate to the choice you made because I made a very different choice, so I'm just going to not acknowledge it.
And, like, he was a fucking admiral in the Navy. Like, that, it makes total sense that he would be very, like, withdrawn and, like, inside of his own person. Like, I thought that actor did such a good job, even though he's only in a very short piece of this, like... okay. And it's like you said, too. Oh, I'm glad they're explaining the origins of why she loves Christmas. And, like, you made us take the tree down the day after Christmas. This was how it is. He's like, well, if your idea of fun is cleaning up pine needles, whatever, I can't stop you. Like, it just feels like a very army dad kind of interaction with, I really wanted you to be a doc. And, like, she's a super important FBI agent. She has a medical degree, but, like, oh, but you didn't go into medicine. And so I'm disappointed in your choices in life. Is just like... Oh, yeah, that dynamic makes a lot of sense. All of this makes a lot of sense.
Oh, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I thought this episode was so good. Even though Mulder wasn't a huge part of it, the stuff that he did was very good. I love his, like, this is bullshit face when he's like, when he selectively chooses not to believe things. And I really like when their roles reverse, especially since this is so early in the series, to have this, like, role reversal is very interesting, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, this is the first time that their roles are reversed, and like they did that very specifically. And also, like, one of the things that happens throughout the course of this episode is that as Mulder retreats more into skepticism, Scully, like, takes on Mulder's personality in many ways. Like, when she goes in and screams at Boggs, like, that is a very Mulder thing to do. And, like,
you son of a bitch!
You will see that in the next episodes we watch. Mulder just snaps sometimes. And, like, I like, too, that they're starting to build up this relationship. And also, like, because this is season 1, the first time you watch this through, when he calls her Dana and is like...
She even is like, oh, Dana, so you're, like, treating me with kid glove.
Because he calls her Dana, there's this, like, code switching that's going on, sort of like with the gym stuff. And so when you watch it the first time, it's like, oh, they're having this, like, moment and he's trying to be relatable to her. But then when you've seen the rest of the series and you go back and rewatch it and it's like... oh, he's calling her Dana. Like, oh, this is him really trying to connect with her. And, like, it's very sweet in many ways, too. And, like, when he, like, caresses her face, like, it feels very weird the first time to be like, what the fuck is going on with these platonic wink wink partners? But, like, when you, like, have the, kind of like you do now, you know more about these characters and you have more of their, like, background and you understand, like, where their relationship goes. Like, these are the roots of that. This is, like, the fundamental roots of whenever he calls her Dana and refers to her this way, you know it's because he's having, like, an emotional connection with her in that moment. So I also enjoy that part of this episode.
My favorite part about that was the way she reacted to it, though.
Yes, absolutely. Like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Also, this is the first time in Beyond the Sea is one of the first episodes to explore what becomes like a central theme for Scully, and you've seen a little of this too, is that she has this like deep attraction to, conflict with, and like desire to be with authoritative men. And like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Like, you have these like daddy issues because your dad treats you in this very specific way, and so it draws you into and like sets up these like pieces for her, like dating her professors later and like having these relationships with older agents where she's drawn into this, which I like a lot. And I'm glad that I don't know that it was necessarily like, we're going to do this and it's definitely going to become a foundation, but I like that they were then able to pull back from something like this too, which I think works really well. I like overall this episode, super well received. People really enjoyed the like flipping of the characters. They were super excited to see more of Scully for the first time. The biggest criticism of this is that a lot of people feel like it makes Scully's character appear weak in her interactions with Boggs, but I think that also is because of the character flip with Mulder, where like when Mulder gets into these situations, he does allow it to break him in lots of ways too. And so it's not just that it's Scully feeling weak in these moments, it's that she's been broken down into the Mulderness of her personality. And like, it makes sense that she then like retreats in this way and has this like, oh my God, I can't deal with the fact that this is in such major conflict with how I feel about science and my religion in many ways too. Like, so I understand why people feel that way, but I just disagree with it.
Also, like, her dad just died.
Yes, exactly. Totally.
Honestly, like, any out of character, quote unquote, shit makes sense because that's totally in character because you do crazy shit and feel crazy shit when somebody you're close to dies.
And unexpectedly dies.
Yeah.
And you just
literally just saw them.
Right, exactly.
I'm glad that this wasn't part of my just watch. I think it helped. I think I still would have liked it if I just watched it while I was watching everything else, but like singling it out and like having to think about it a little bit more. I just think this episode is so good.
Good. I'm really glad that you liked it. All right. Are we ready for Deep Throat's mission logs?
No, we're ready for Synopsis Showdown.
Fuck. Someday I'll get this whole script right. Season 4.
You ready for Synopsis Showdown?
I am. Okay, I go first, right?
You do.
Okay. Mulder spends an entire episode telling Scully not to believe a killer about his visions, even though they are absolutely real, only to shame her from his hospital bed in the final scene for not believing.
Scully loses her father and almost loses her relentless skepticism when confronted with either a truly spectacular con man or a God's honest psychic. Mulder, as always, is no help at all.
Mulder's gonna Mulder. All right, you ready for Deep Throat's mission logs?
Let's see what's in his throat.
Larkin, I would speak to you.
It does seem unavoidable.
Okay, starting with Journey to Babble. This was directed by Joseph Pevney, who we've talked about previous. He also directed City on the Edge of Forever, Amok Time, Trouble with Tribbles,
Yeah,
Arena.
He's a Bamf.
He's a goddamn Bamf. The guy just makes gold. It's fantastic.
Yeah, all of those episodes are bangers.
Yes. Stell has mentioned a bunch in this episode. DC Fontana. It's someone we should talk about more. And I think we need to like devote a block of time, whether we pick it on an episode or something like really re-release extra. We need to talk about DC Fontana and how much of early Trek had a woman's guiding hand in it and how that helped shape it. It's just too big to not realize.
At this point, because at the beginning, when she was first writing, she went by Dorothy. And then at this point in season 2, they were like, let's just say DC Fontana.
Which I'm sure like sidestepped a bunch of gross, sad sexism at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, just full on Trek mother. Many of the costumes worn by extras in the hallway and reception room scenes were recycled from several first season episodes, including the outfits worn by Galactic High Commissioner Ferris in the Galileo 7 and by Lazarus in the Alternative Factor. A female extra, Jeannie Malone, can be seen wearing a faux fur dress worn by Lenore Carradine in The Conscience of the King, complete with other recycled costume pieces. Basically, they just ran all of these people through the costume closet, threw a bunch on them, and as Stell said, a lot of those things became known uniforms for all of these different alien species that we were introducing in this episode. In the original runs of these series, and not in the remasters, it was something that was taken out. That wall kick that you talked about during the fight scene between Telev and Kirk, like just after it, there's a comical coconut conch sound in the original, like a dunk, that I think they were trying to like just spice it up a little bit, but it's too fucking funny. The makeup in this episode is done by Fred Phillips. Phillips' credit as a makeup artist encompasses such feature films as The Wizard of Oz, Around the World in 80 Days, House of Usher, Blackula, which starred William Marshall, which we've talked about on this, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Hey, crossover!
And television shows like Bat Masterson, Outer Limits. Before Star Trek, Philip worked with William Shatner on a 1964 episode of The Outer Limits and in the 1965 film Incubus. His daughter Jana does makeup work with him on the first Trek movie and then goes on to do makeup work for TNG and DS9 as well and has an extensive makeup career. So it's just a Star Trek makeup family.
That rules.
Stell mentioned this earlier, and I will get around to the meat of it now. Surrounding the species name and how those little people were used in this episode. Manny Koto, who is a showrunner for Enterprise, specifically mostly on the 4th season, originally pushed to have that species on the show more and also involved in the Coalition of Planets as well. That said, at the time it proved to be too expensive, but he named the species the Ithenite or Ithenite, Ithenite.
Okay. I knew it was somewhere, so I just assumed everything was James Blish, but that's cool that it was like a Enterprise thing.
And that's a name of species that is mentioned by time travel cop who fucks and has a very hard job, Daniels. Yeah. This episode and the events that occur in it are used in Star Trek Online, specifically in an expansion, Agents of Yesterday. In the mission Return to Babel, you as the player character is sent back to these events to stop the evil time-traveling race from Enterprise and beyond, the Nakul. Gav's death and Kirk's stabbing were perpetrated by the Nakul, who are time-fuckery Nazis, and the ship blowing up after the Enterprise shoots it isn't the ship self-destructing, it's you as the player character blowing it up.
Oh, cool.
So they do a lot of fun continuity stuff with that in the video game. Moving on to casting notes really quick, Russ Peake, who here plays one of Sarek's aides, also appears as one of Mirror Spock's bodyguards in Mirror Mirror. So like just keeping the family together. One of those copper-skinned little persons that we talked about, his name is Billy Curtis. I couldn't find the name of the other one, but Curtis, of course, was in The Wizard of Oz as well. He was also in a kind of famous/infamous B movie, The Terror of Tiny Town, which was a Western completely done with little people. He normally played villains, snide people trying to go against a lot of stereotypes at the time of little people being jolly and happy or whatever. There's a funny story of his work on The Wizard of Oz. It said he tried a couple of times to put the moves on Judy Garland. He had other big parts in the 70s, notably in the Clint Eastwood movie High Plains Drifter and the crime caper melodrama Little Cigars. And he was, for the entirety of the character being portrayed, from the character's inception to his death when the character was retired, Mayor McCheese for the McDonald's franchise.
Oh, good for him. Get that residual national money.
That is Reggie Nalder as Shross. That's the Andorian that isn't the traitor, the one that talks the
one
most.
That's not an Orion.
Exactly. The actual,
The actual
Andorian. Yeah. It's not well seen in this episode. It is kind of underneath the makeup, but the lower third of his face is covered in like scarring like that. And that's one of the things that he's most noticed and famous for. Nalder has at least 3 different explanations for those scars. So he did it first. Fuck you, Joker. One of his first roles was that of Ryan, the leering assassin of Hitchcock's 1956 remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much. Another well-known role is him playing the vampire Kurt Barlow in the TV miniseries Salem's Lot, based off a Stephen King story. Others include Russian operative in The Manchurian Candidate, a yellow-jacketed gunman in Dario Argento's The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. So, like, just horror movie DNA built around this man.
In his limited role on this, he does have, like, a spooky, horror-y vibe, even though he's technically a good guy. He's like, oh, I could have killed you, but there's no reason for me to. So
Yeah.
There's
it
a
works with that, like, we're a violent race, and, like,
Right.
I'm choosing not to be violent in this moment.
totally.
there's a certain Vincent Price-esque gravitas to him, even
Yes.
though he hasn't played as high class as that. And it shows because a lot of his resume is horror stuff. That's John Wheeler as Gav. With this episode being his third listed credit, Wheeler goes on to have a great career as a film actor, with earlier TV roles including Mannix, Green Acres, Bonanza, Mission Impossible, Happy Days, and The Brady Bunch, all the way through to the 90s with roles as a reporter in Apollo 13 and TV shows like ER, Step by Step, and 90210. One of the main sources that we use for this show, and definitely for my segments, is a website called Memory Alpha, which if you ever want to really, really dig into Trek, just go to Memory Alpha. It's an amazing fan site. On each of their actors' pages, like towards the bottom list of their credits, they also go into like crossovers of other guest actors that have worked on other things together. Even though this is John Wheeler's only Trek episode, just that portion of his Memory Alpha page was like half a page long.
Interesting.
It was just a bunch of spider webs all over the place of other people he had worked with. Also, like notably also working with William Shatner again in a 1974 movie called Big Bad Mama.
I bet that's great.
You want to go on a Shatner deep dive, that goes on the
I
list.
Why not? He was so handsome.
No, thank you.
I think Erin prefers him before he was self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's William O'Connell as Telev, the booba-faced Heidi Andorian assassin. Frequently cast by Clint Eastwood for movies like The Outlaw Josie Wales and the musical Paint Your Wagon, and both Any Which Way But Loose films. O'Connell also plays the creature in the original Outer Limits Run episode The Chameleon, as well as guest roles on Rawhide Bonanza, The Munsters, and returning appearances on Petticoat Junction.
Petticoat Junction.
Yeah, deep in
I
on
do
Petticoat
love
Junction.
Petticoat Junction?
My mom used to really like that show.
Oh,
Fuck yeah. Okay. I wasn't expecting to pop anyone with that.
no.
It's not often you hear about Petticoat Junction.
Of course, we've previously talked about Mark Leonard as the Romulan commander in Balance of Terror, like Stell mentioned. Gosh, what a formative Trek actor. Just him being the first showing of that and also the first showing of
He's
Sarek.
so good.
He's so good.
love, even in his limited roles in the movies, like he's so good. I love, people write off Search for Spock as not being a great movie, which is like they're wrong. Most opinions about Star Trek are wrong. But like, he is so good in that. He doesn't show, that's the first time he shows up again after this episode. And he is just on top of it and like really is the catalyst of that movie. And to watch him struggle, like we see him struggle with like even talking to his son here, and then in Search for Spock being like struggling to be like, is my son really dead? Like he can't be, but do that in a Vulcan way is, Mark Leonard is so fucking good, man.
So good.
So good.
He is only 7 years older than Leonard Nimoy,
Oh.
playing his father in this, which you can do a lot with makeup and costumes and things like that.
I mean, it's the same thing with Scully and her mom. They're like not that far.
Nope.
Yeah, they
No,
don't
not at all.
look that far apart.
No, not at all.
But I'd rather that than like something ridiculous where it's like we put somebody in weird age makeup and like
Yeah.
women can only be certain things.
Right. One of the stories surrounding this appearance of Mark Leonard on the show is for 2 weeks after the airing of this episode, Mark Leonard received more fan mail than Leonard Nimoy.
Hell yeah.
So everyone just goes right for daddy.
Bitches love Vulcans.
I want
the way.
to play kissy hands with you. And then that is, of course, Jane Wyatt as Amanda. When she was offered this role, she had never heard of Trek before and thought it was a comedy show. She was very surprised when she showed up to the set and everyone was being super duper serious about this shit.
Especially it's a pretty serious episode.
Yeah.
But, you know, she turned out a great performance as well. She is emotional when she needs to be. She's understanding when she needs to be. She is listed on the credits for this show as Miss Jane Wyatt, and that's because of her extensive credits before this. She started her career bouncing back and forth between Broadway and being a Universal
She has
contracted
Broadway
artist.
vibes.
Yeah, she totally
huge
does.
Broadway vibes.
She reminds me so much of Debbie Reynolds.
She really does.
That makes a lot of sense.
So she was a Universal actor and was in films like Lost Horizon and My Blue Heaven before transitioning to TV, and her role of Margaret Anderson on Father Knows Best, which netted her 3 consecutive Emmys.
Damn.
all before her appearance on Trek here.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so that's where the Ms. comes from.
Got
She was
it.
already big stuff. After this appearance, she does Love American Style, The Virginian, Fantasy Island, Love Boat, and a 7-episode run on St. Elsewhere, along with the other appearances in Trek that we talked about. Moving on to The X-Files. Beyond the Sea was written by Morgan and Wong, of course.
Classic,
Yes.
yeah.
Directed by David Nutter, another X-Files mainstay who we've talked about a bunch. Nutter was thrilled with this installment. He's quoted as saying, "To me, I think it's the most accomplished piece of directing actors I have been able to do." I thought Brad... Yeah.
That makes sense. I can't speak to his work, but like he got great performances out of the actors in this episode.
Yeah.
I thought Brad Dourif was brilliant. To me, it's right up there with Ice. You'll see Ice soon as
Yeah,
well.
within the
Season,
next couple episodes, you'll see that one. You're gonna like that
That's
one.
going to be a fun episode because the Star Trek episode is low-key one of my favorite episodes.
Ice is one of my favorite episodes.
Nice. He was also, of course, super happy with Gillian Anderson's performance on this. They worked together extensively on this. He was really happy he could give her that episode and felt like she proved herself on this show with this episode.
That scene where she goes into scream at Boggs and then he does the psychic vision of her as a 14-year-old where she's just like holding her hair and trying not to freak out. Like she just makes a lot of really great physical acting choices in this.
She's quoted in talking about this episode as saying, "I remember getting the script and realizing that it was the first time that I really had some real material to work with. I remember sitting down with David Nutter and going through the different beats and the points and the emotional arc and wanting very much to get it right." So like being on this show for whatever 11 episodes and finally getting to do your work as an actor and not just be these like agents experiencing all of this thing.
Mulder, I
just-
don't believe you.
Right,
Exactly.
just reacting to Mulder actually being like the catalyst for what's going on.
Much of the episode's family drama aspect came from Glenn Morgan's personal experience, as he had been affected deeply by seeing how his mother had reacted to her father dying. He's quoted as saying, "So there's a lot of that kind of thing in there, nearly word for word from my mom. We Lost Your Dad is exactly her phone call to me. That's how I learned my grandma died." So just using those words. Also lore stuff from him. The version that we hear of Beyond the Sea, of course, the song that we get the title from, is sang by Bobby Darin. Bobby Darin is one of the Morgan's parents' favorite artists, so much so that Darin Morgan is named after Bobby Darin.
Oh, I love
Bobby
that
Darin's
song.
the first person to sing Beyond the Sea.
I believe so.
Yeah, it's the most famous version of that song.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was one of his originals. I went through a phase where I was really into Bobby Darin.
I
My
really
favorite
like
Bobby Darin song is Black Coffee. Anyways, whatever. I love Bobby Darin.
That was amazing.
I went through a very heavy Bobby Darin phase.
Also, more from Morgan, when devising the Kiss and Kill tattoos, those are actually inspired by the song We're Desperate by the band X. There's a lyric in there that says it's kiss or kill. So
Interesting.
he got that from there, which I thought was cool too.
We talked while we were watching it too about like they're really bad. All the tattoos are really bad, and I like that detail because they look like prison tattoos, which is what they definitely are.
And also, when you usually see knuckle tattoos like that, they're made to be written while you're making a fist to the person you're
Right,
pointing
they're-
the
so
fist
they're
at.
legible.
Where these are
For him.
legible towards him if he holds his hands out, which
Right.
I think is a really interesting introspective detail for the character of Boggs.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to like lore fan stuff. In a scene near the start of the episode, Scully apparently sees her father silently mouthing words. Don Davis is actually reciting the Lord's Prayer silently.
Really?
That's what he's saying.
That's a really good detail.
Bobby Darin, he just popularized it. It's based on a French song. I just had to look it up.
Oh,
I didn't want to
okay.
be wrong.
Okay, then I'll cut it. I'll cut that out.
No,
if
you
want
can
it.
keep it.
Yeah.
This is we're here. We're all here to learn.
We're doing this together.
It's his most he is the most popular singer to sing it. He popularized it, but it's originally a French song.
That is the voice I hear in my head when you hear that
Yes.
song, even though like Sinatra's done it and everyone's done it. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Continue on.
Briefly, as Mulder is leaving his office, notable on his coat rack is a NICAP hat, which we saw while we were watching. Of course, that becomes more prominent later with his best nerdy friend, Max Fennick. Heart, Max forever.
Love Max.
I just want to protect Max.
And then as protect Max at all fucking costs. As Erin mentioned earlier, this is probably going to be the only time we see Scully's younger brother, Charles, and who we assume is his wife and kids at that funeral. Since Maggie says this is supposed to be family only, we would assume that the only people there would be their immediate family.
Charles, Dana, Melissa,
Bill?
Bill.
Yeah.
William.
Both Mulder and Scully's dads are named William. Ooh. Also, their totally normal son that they have much later.
Moving on to some casting stuff, we briefly see Randy Lee as a paramedic. He's also a prolific stunt performer with credits all over the place, including most recently Sonic the Hedgehog. Oh. That's Chad Willett as James Summers. With this being one of his first roles in television, he goes on to have an amazing career with regular cast TV roles on Madison, The Cape, Jack and Jill, The Chronicle, and The Beyond. He also did a guest role on Supernatural, playing Mr. Wyatt in the episode After School Special.
Oh my God.
Yes, that is why I wanted to say that one out loud. Also seen as Elizabeth Hawley is Lucy Voltaggio. She guests on Murder, She Wrote and Millennium before doing a 72-episode run as Hannah Scott on General Hospital.
Oh, damn.
As Warden Joseph Cash, that is Don McKay. Also seen in a bunch of other X-Files episodes. He's a judge in Pusher. He's Oates in The List. He's Charlie in The Host. He's also returning character Jack Meredith on Millennium. He played Art Feld on Sliders and does guesting roles on Poltergeist The Legacy, on the 90s run of Outer Limits, and voice work on Sabrina the Animated Series, as well as Smallville, SG-1, and Bates Motel.
Damn.
We see Fred Henderson here as Agent Thomas. He also plays Agent Rich in Dwayne Barry.
Oh, shit.
Spoiler, we're going to watch that one next.
Oh, damn.
So that's weird.
That is weird.
and just something that happened purely by chance of us putting these episodes together and shit like that. He's also done guest work on Outer Limits, SG-1. He was in Final Destination 2. He played Dr. Langston on Smallville. Also, a couple of episodes of Supernatural as like background people. Supergirl, and he's Governor Dooley on Riverdale. Also, surprise! He's our voice actor bomb for this episode, doing extensive work in Gundam series, particularly Seed, and voicing Howard Stark on Iron Man, Armored Adventures.
Armored Adventures.
That's Lawrence King as Lucas Henry. His biggest role outside of this is playing Ulek on season 1 of The Grid for 6 episodes. That is Sheila Larkin as Margaret Scully. At this point, Sheila had been married to X-Files co-executive producer R.W. Goodwin since 1978, but her resume and performances speak for themselves. However, he did specifically request that her and the other actors get a heating tent just off camera for that funeral scene because it was very windy out that day.
He was like, my wife is not getting a cold.
Right? She is miserable when she's sick. We are not doing that.
Her credits start in 1967 with episodes of Bonanza, 23 episodes of Men at Law as Deborah Sullivan, Police Story, The Virginian, Starsky and Hutch, Barnaby Jones, Dallas, Incredible Hulk, Outer Limits, Poltergeist Legacy, all before doing 17 episodes as Mama Scully.
Mm-hmm.
So
she's so good.
She put in
I'm
the work
glad
as
that
well.
they continued to bring her back because she's really good. She has some really good stuff in the next episodes we're going to watch too, especially in Ascension.
And as Captain William Scully, however briefly, that's Don Davis. Surprise, it's our space dad, General Hammond. Davis is a huge deal in SG-1. Did over 160 or so episodes and several TV movies. His last appearance as that character, General Hammond, was in Stargate Continuum, which was released in the US a month after his death. So it was like a huge part of the end of his series. He's a graduate of SIU, Carbondale, and a former captain in the U.S. Army stationed in Korea in the 1960s. So, like, comes at those general roles from a very honest place. He had previously worked with David Duchovny on Twin Peaks, which he plays a huge general role in as well. His credits start in 1985 with guest appearances on MacGyver, LA Law, a 6-episode return run on 21 Jump Street before playing Major Briggs in Twin Peaks, and then all other Twin Peaks things, movies, even The Return, he plays that character there as well. Was also in A League of Their Own, The Fan, also Outer Limits, plays Roy Church in the In Cold Blood TV miniseries, Mr. Winslow on Madison, NCIS, Dead Zone, and then, just so much of his career on Stargate SG-1.
He's really good in this episode. He's only in it very briefly, but delivers a really good performance.
One of his quotes on his page is, "I like sci-fi because it's really one of the last places or genres that has clearly defined good and evil. And it's a place where you can have heroes without having them be overly flawed." We saw him on an X-Files episode, but like, yeah. Stargate, that is definitely true.
I mean, that's sort of how he's Scully's hero, but he's very deeply flawed in many ways. Like, again, that conversation that they have where he's like, "How's your work? Great, cool. Never speak of this again."
And in that, you can definitely feel like the weight underneath that, even without Scully's mom being like, "You fucking talk to her." You can feel there's familial tension there.
He's a very good actor.
And of course, that is Brad Dourif as Luther Lee Boggs. If you don't know who we mean by Brad Dourif when we say his name, just like look up the name and look at one picture and you'll be like, "Oh, that guy."
Yeah. He's very recognizable.
Right. Well, he's been some big stuff. Like you said, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He's Grima Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. He was a major character on Deadwood.
Oh my God, he was. That's right.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna go through a lot of that now. It's actually a lot more than that too. During the early 1970s, Dourif appeared in a number of plays and off-Broadway and at Woodstock, including with Milos Forman, who cast him in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Cuckoo's Nest was his second movie, and it earned him a Golden Globe Award for Best Acting Debut, a British Academy Film Award for Best Supporting Actor, and the Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor that you talked about. That freaked him out, and he actually left Hollywood to go back to Broadway and off-Broadway for a couple of years because he had such a big debut. Once he comes back, he does films like Eyes of Laura Mars, John Huston's Wise Blood, another Foreman flick, Ragtime, also David Lynch's Dune and Blue Velvet. Also notably, he is and is still the voice of the evil doll Chucky in all Child's Play stuff.
Oh, I did not know that.
That man terrorized my childhood.
Including his TV series and a 2021 episode of Monday Night Raw.
Oh, yeah, that's right. 'Cause they did a whole Chucky segment because there's a new Chucky thing. We watch wrestling. And by we, I mean I do.
That was Dourif. That's him. As Stell mentioned, Deadwood, also Ponderosa, the Lord of the Rings TV guest appearances include Babylon 5, an episode of Millennium, Fringe, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and 3 episodes of Star Trek Voyager as crewman Lon Suder. He was most recently announced to play Dr. William Blackmore in the forthcoming Herbert West Reanimator. So a Reanimator re-up, it really makes sense for him to be in it. Yeah, he's that guy.
Good. He's so talented.
No, it was 5 hours of Boggs's channeling. After 3 hours, I asked him to summon up the soul of Jimi Hendrix and request it all along the Watchtower. You know, the guy's been dead 20 years, but he still hasn't lost his edge.
All right, now for our overall thoughts. These episodes tie together because they're obviously about family drama.
Right.
But specifically about, like, dads not being able to talk to their children and who have faulty hearts. Where's the lie, Erin?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, like I thought it was really interesting while we were watching it that it's like we watched 2 dad heart attack episodes and they were both dads who like very specifically their children did not feel that their dads were proud of them because they made a career decision that their parent like deeply disagreed with, but then they still proved that they were very good at their job and ultimately made their parents proud. Like these are very good crosses to put together. And like for all of the different family drama ones we could have picked from both series, like it worked out that this, again, we're very good at podcaster.
Well, we had to find one this season that's not like, oh, we shoehorned this in.
Yeah, we have had a real run of, we just kind of shoved this into this theme.
Back on track.
And we did Ghosts. Well, yours wasn't.
Okay. Shoehorned. That one was mega shoehorned in.
For yours. Mine was Ghosts. But yes, these made a very good pair. I'm glad that these ones went together as well as they did.
Yeah, it was a good watching experience. Okay, so for our casual fan questionnaire, as a casual fan, would you recommend this episode to someone else? Can you do it?
As a casual fan, would you recommend this episode to a newbie?
Hell yes. It's so good. And because it's so early, if you just have basic pop culture knowledge, you don't really need to know more.
Right. And even if you don't understand that it's a switching of the roles, they both do
I feel like you can feel that.
Yeah, exactly. Especially once you get to the end, you get the whiplash from Mulder. I'm like, why can't you just believe?
Mulder even says in the episode they would expect this behavior out of spooky Mulder, but not you. Yeah.
Not Dana Scully. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I think I would probably recommend this to a newbie as well, because even if you don't have like any knowledge about Spock and his like family separations or whatever, like it's just a really relatable story about a kid who wants to make their parent proud and is unsure whether or not they've done that.
Yeah. And also
faulty hard dads.
A parent being in the middle of like, I love my husband, I love my son, I don't know who to support because I can't choose sides.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think these are both good drop-in episodes.
What is a scene or moment from the episode that you won't forget?
Chapel with no pants on, probably. It was just so surprising to be like, whoa, that's your whole butt. Okay, that's that, I guess. Yeah, and then I think probably Bones just being absolutely fucking delighted to learn about the teddy bear. That was just very funny. I like that a lot, actually.
For me, it's got to be the confrontation scene in the jail where she is like, you son of a bitch. And then he has his whole, goes into like using like a memory from her and then doing the dad thing and then him like fighting that and we're like, no, you don't get that. That scene is just incredible.
Yeah. It's just really good and strong acting from both of them.
Absolutely. Are you shipping anybody in this episode?
This is a McSpurk episode for sure.
Yeah, this is a triumvirate episode.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. Like they're both just so delighted in what's going on with Spock, and then
they're also like taking care of him.
Well,
too.
yeah, that's what I mean too. They're like delighted about what's happening with like, ooh, we get to hear these embarrassing stories, and then also like, we're going to trick you into doing the right thing here. And that's because we're husbands and we know what's best for you.
Love you.
Everybody just shut up. Oh, I got the final word. Oh, this never happened. Oh, I got the vapors now. Are you shipping anyone in this episode?
I could see that if I was watching everything in order. I feel like this is an important episode to have watched to build up to that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in season 1, they're very they're building their friendship and like Mulder is learning to trust her and she's learning to trust him. But this is kind of a episode where they drop a lot of that pretense and they're like, I'm seeing you as a person. And I care about you as a person. I care that you almost fucking bled out. I care that you're dealing with your dad dying, and I'm also trying to like protect you from being like taken advantage of. And so I don't know if I like ship them in this, but this is like, I feel like an important episode on the road to the shipping.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Is this a fuck, fine, or a flop?
I don't know that I would say it's like a 100% fuck. I think this might be like a fuck minus.
All right.
Yeah, like it's better than a fine plus for sure. But it's, like I said, I liked it a lot, but I liked the pieces of it better than I liked the whole of it, I think.
Yeah. Mine would be a fuck. Beyond the Sea is very good.
Yay, I'm so glad you liked this one. Again, this is like such
too.
a funny one to be like, hey Stella, what's one of your favorite episodes? You're like, Beyond the Sea. It's very good.
The acting is just like incredible. I don't know if I would say like as an X-Files episode, like I love this. I think it's super indicative of what the X-Files is. But as like a good episode, I think it's one of the strongest ones we've seen.
And I think even as an X-File, it's really good because, like you were saying before, there's this is he, isn't he, of him being a psychic. And, like, because Brad Dourif puts in such a strong performance, you can kind of go either way with it. Again, I'm on the side of psychic, especially having seen this several times. But part of that is those very strong acting scenes with him.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yay. All right. You can find us on the internet. You can follow us at NYD Productions on Twitter and interact with the show using the hashtag XTrexPod. You can find me at NYD Urgency on Instagram.
You can find me on Twitter at Stella_Cheeks.
And you can find me on Twitter as Haberdasher9K.
You can also email us at xtrexpod@gmail.com with questions or comments. If you want fix where Kirk and Spock are yelled at by their moms for being dumbasses, I got that because we love some badass mom moments.
And if you want more special behind-the-scenes action like our script notes, outtakes, extra podcasts like unofficial channels, and access to our Discord, then check out our Patreon at patreon.com/MYD Productions, where you can get access to all of that and more for only $1.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and to tell your friends. We find this nerdy shit is better when it's shared.
We'll see you next episode for the Red Hot Pants episode.
It's real. It's a real thing that's happening.
That theme you're both gonna nail.
Impossible not to.
Yeah, it would be really hard to shoehorn a Red Hot Pants into a Red Hot Pants theme.
It's the theme that's shoehorned that time.
It's a reverse shoehorn. In the meantime,
Believe boldly.
Seek truth.
ship proudly.
X-Trex is created and written by Stella Cheeks, Erin Cline, and Bobby Hoffman, and produced by Bobby Hoffman for NYD Productions. Our show theme is Alien Spy by Ionix, and our show art was made by Jonathan Curtis.
Dana, after all you've seen, after all the evidence, why can't you believe?
Shut up!